thanks to University of Florida for convening this group, to be honest. This is our second time coming to this conference. We came last year. We'll talk a little bit about what that actually meant to us in our CATS AI journey. But just quick intros before we get going. I'm Ian McClure. I have a hat on our healthcare side, VP of Innovation, and then I'm an Associate Vice President for Research, Innovation, and Economic Impact on our university side within our UK research domain, overseeing what we call UK Innovate, not UF Innovates, but very similar, overseeing all of our innovation programs, entrepreneurship, commercialization, industry partnering for research, and now AI. And we'll talk about that after my colleague here introduces himself.
Hey, my name is Heath Price. I work in partnerships at the University of Kentucky. I've been at UK for just over 8 years, and over the last 15 months have gotten to take a deep dive with Ian. We spend a lot of time on our campus talking and thinking about partnerships. It happens to be in my title. I work in partnerships, but the truth is, and I think this time we're going to spend with you just for a few minutes, hopefully is representative of how we've approached not only AI, but the way that foundationally as a university we think about working internal as partners, and then how we think about going external to the university. And I think a lot of what we want to share has been a journey. Ian mentioned that we were here a year ago. It was a little earlier. It was in February, so 14 months ago. It was a real catalyst for us in the dialogue and discussions that we wanted to have. But I would tell you that the way we felt when we were here in February 2025 was very much like the left box, right? It was thinking and wondering, what does a very fragmented place in our campus need to or want to look like within our environment to start approaching this journey of AI? And so as we've done that, and as we come today, we really are just excited to have conversations like this and dialogue, so we greatly appreciate this opportunity. Ian, maybe I'd toss it and say, as we've thought about that, and as we left here 14 months ago, we knew we had a problem, maybe / you would have called it challenge, with a positive spin. What do you think was one of the first things we kind of took as our frame to think about that?
Yeah, so we've talked about our journey here. There you go. So I think one thing that was really important for us when we started this, when we came into this conference last year, we were about 5 months into designing our CATS AI strategy, which stands for Commonwealth AI Transdisciplinary Strategy, CATS. We love acronyms in universities. But the mandate was perhaps the most important thing, right? For us, we got a mandate from our Board of Trustees, and they asked us to be the partner of choice for the Commonwealth of Kentucky to advance responsible adoption of AI. That was our go forward, our green light, if you will, and that allowed us top down to build a strategy that could encompass the entire enterprise. It helped us get to sort of this mission, and we have a very strong part of who we are, which is we're a land-grant university, so we serve the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And so how do we do this in a way that can serve all of Kentucky in our entire community, right? So that mandate carried us forward, and that allowed us to get to a vision and a mission. And the mandate from our Board of Trustees flowed down to our president, and our president approached Heath and I and asked us to form a big table, form a task group, and figure out how to do this. And I'll never forget his words, how to do this in an orderly, intelligent, and strategic manner. And so for us, that was critical, because that kicked us off, and we, with this broad table, settled on this vision, which is a future for Kentucky where artificial intelligence expands human potential, accelerates economic progress, and improves both the health and the lives of the people we serve. We do have a health system, 6 hospitals, so that's a big part of our strategy as well. But then the mission, so taking down the board's mandate, right, this being this partner institution of choice, was critical, but how do we do it through a comprehensive framework? Right? So this mission is to take that mandate and then build a framework, a governance structure. And we're believers in you build the governance structure first so you can take the lid off of the innovation potential to do this right. So we had vision, we had mission, then we started with some guiding questions. And so this is interesting because these guiding questions probably look like any university could set these same guiding questions, but it's a little different because each one, as an institution picks your AI strategy, you have a few philosophical determinations to make. Where on this spectrum of caution to just sort of exuberance do you want to be culturally when you pick where we're headed? And also, whose lens are you going to look through, right? Do you serve, are you going to be sort of students first, or faculty first, or research heavy, or try to balance all of these? So our guiding questions, of course, the first focused on students. You know, what will the students experience as AI transforms learning and discovery? Now, a part of that is how the faculty can sort of lead that experience. But again, the focus of our question, number one guiding question, was how is that student experience going to change? The second one was how will AI reshape the way that our staff work, and for us, our care providers deliver care, right? So thinking more also, not just, we go to AI is going to augment the way we do research, for example, and we'll get to research. But we have 72,000 people across our enterprise, many of which don't do research and are not students, right? They're doing administrative tasks. They're running operations. They're getting this entire machine to work well. So how's AI going to reshape the way that they can do their work? How can it accelerate research and innovation? If you think about probably the thing that AI might have the largest impact as it gets to results of a university, it's the accelerated pathway to discoveries, right? So how are we going to handle that? But then this last question is sort of this overarching, okay, well then if we care through the lens of the students, all of our staff and research, then how are we preparing our people? And this is where we really got to this sort of holistic preparing our people. So we get guiding questions. We get to core principles, right? Yeah. Before we can actually start to set out what is our framework and what is our governance, we realized, so we've started with the mandate, we've gone down to who we care for, what questions is guiding us, and then this is really critical because our broad table, as Heath will remember, and it took us a number of months to really settle on this set of core principles. And so let's go through these. These are really critically important because this is sort of these are the North Stars that we aimed for when we were deciding philosophically who we want to be. The first, perhaps the most important, maybe these aren't so much in an order, but maybe that top one is the most important, which is we needed to have a clear structure with central leadership, but also a broadly participatory, broadly matrixed governance framework. So this is something we took away from we were here last year, and this is maybe the biggest question we were trying to tackle when we came last year. We brought our provost, our executive vice president for finance, Heath and I, and we sat down with the University of Florida leadership and heard what they had been doing and some others, and we realized, okay, to do this enterprise-wide, to do this holistically, we have to have a very clear governance framework. And governance may be the wrong word, and so we started actually just using the framework language, right? How do we set this governance structure up so that we have a central ability to quickly get to decision-making, not for policy only, but really also to bring opportunities, ideas, proposals, all of those kinds of things and challenges from the very different domains up for quick decision-making. That's key. So once we have that set, then you get to access. For us, two key core principles for us is to create a broadly democratized access to tools. Thinking about the digital divide, and when you have 72,000 people, we think everyone has a personal choice. They could adopt whatever generative AI tool they want, and they were, because we did inventory, and it was happening everywhere. But it was key for us to make sure, and in the University of Kentucky, land-grant public institution, they're having very different means, and they're coming from very different inclinations about doing this. So how do we create a broad, equitable access to tools that levels a playing field for everyone, but also creates a more secure environment within which they can access those tools? We'll talk about that. Access to training was a key one, because you can't just provide the tools without the ability to, how do you use those tools, right? But then, if you think about those two things together, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're thinking of activating engagement of these tools and the training, it's all about this builder mindset, right? So if you think about, we have one responsibility, which is, okay, teach people about what AI means, teach people maybe how to use the generative AI tools, how you use co-pilots, or how do you use, ChatGPT. But that's different than also teaching people how to think about being a builder, right? And that's this mentality and this culture shift. And we'll get to how we're doing this through what we call a sandbox. But we wanted our people to not just learn how to use a tool within their workflow to be more efficient, but also to build their own tools, to think about the possibilities when you get into a builder mindset that AI unlocks for people, whereas before maybe you needed to be a software engineer or a coder or something to actually have that builder mentality. So you had to be and this is, I love this is from Heath actually, his language. We wanted to be the university that demystifies AI. So a core principle for us was not just to deploy training and teach people how to use AI, but really to demystify what it means for different disciplines, different use cases, and where you're headed, right? So I think a lot of people might call this like the ethics or AI for good part, but for us it was more than that. You had to sort of be part of an environment that is not just handing you these tools, but really encouraging, right, the use and saying, we're going to be an AI university. And that's actually a flag that we have flown that we now have a responsibility to live up to. So demystifying it is a key one. Of course, if we're going to do all those things, you have to then balance risk. And so we have done this in a way where we have set up our governance structure and some subcommittees that are looking at not just risk from a lose your data. We all think about the data risk. But for an institution that's thinking about a holistic AI strategy, you have to think about things like predictability of spend, right? We all pay for a cloud. How is that cloud going to get used? At what pace? If this truly gets adopted the way we hope it might, how do we stay out in front of where are things going? So that's a big part of that, right? Of course, we all have resources. We all have our own centers, programs, smart people, subject matter experts, and they might be housed all over the campus. So we want to foster those resources, and we did. We had 150, we took an inventory, 150 different things going on when we started building this strategy. And so we wanted to leverage those things, not override or supersede with our strategy. So we included those, and we plucked those out of wherever they were happening, whatever administrative units, whatever colleges, and we made them a part of this broad table, and they're now part of this CATS AI umbrella. The final one is to draw from external partners. We all have external partners that matter when it comes to demanding the talent that's coming from us, partnering with us for the research that we do, or funding that research. And we want to make sure that we have a table around us giving us all real-time feedback throughout this process, which is going to be key for driving sort of where we go in this very fast evolving.
Yeah, so if you're at all like me, Ian talked about the conversations on campus we got to have. We would be remiss if we didn't say that it was critical from the beginning, that mandate he referenced, that our executive leadership was all in, that wanted to create the conversation and the dialogue, gave us time. But if you're anything like me, we got through this list of 8, I think I went home and cried. I certainly was intimidated. It was all very smooth to Ian in his brain, he talks about it, but I felt overwhelmed, right? How do you start to bring some of this into the reality? And I think one of the words, we did talk governance early, we started using the word framework, but it was all about how we were going to design a structure that's allowed us to move through these last 12, 13, 14 months with an eye on there's lots to do in the future. And much of what we're talking about today and kind of how we think about the structure has been about how we're thinking about where we want to be with that matrix, the partners on campus, with our faculty, our researchers, our students, very much front of mind. Where are we trying to go? So talk a little bit about that, how we got past governance to structure.
Yeah, so this is more about the process. So we've set mission, vision, or core principles, or guiding questions. So then, of course, we had to go through a process to build something like this, to get to an announcement and then an actual activation phase. So, of course, like most institutions are very good at forming committees and having broad tables. And so we did that. Very active listening, lots of open comment periods, feedback sessions, and then we got into a documentation phase. So this was a white paper for us, and we shared things amongst our broad table, very similar to like the AI for University Administrators Guide that the University of Florida has published, and we eventually even created some of our own, sort of what does it mean to be an AI university. So that documentation phase allowed us to then go on a roadshow. So we had this 20-page white paper, and we started to socialize it across the campus. So Heath and I remember this was last summer, we spent last summer doing 10, 15, 20 roadshow town halls with stakeholder groups we had identified. These are associate deans for research and our dean's council and the student government association and the faculty senate and the staff senate. And we did a roadshow period where we made it very clear we are devising a strategy. Here it is in front of you, but we want your feedback before we go any further. And we have to have you bought into where we're headed, both philosophically and the plan that we're going to put in place. So then, of course, it gets into an implementation phase. So we got through the town hall roadshow unscathed somewhat, refined, solidified the strategy into what we now call the CATS AI strategy. And then that path forward got to announcement, activation, and partnership. Partnership being a key aspect of this. So here's what that might look like from a timeline perspective for us. And of course, as you know, the University of Florida, for example, started with their strategy building like 2017, I think, 2017, 2018, right? So this took a long time. For us, it was about a 15-month or so process where in the fall of 24 is when we got that mandate, that board mandate. We looked to the horizon, we took an inventory, we found all those things going on, fragmented all over our campus, and that's what really got us into, okay, we need to go down to the Florida AI2 Summit last year, and we published that white paper and started doing our own socialization. That took us to the summer. That's where we were doing, and so now you can think we're about 9 months in here. We started doing our town hall roadshow and partner diligence. So we also knew, remember our board had told us we want you to be the partner of choice. And so for us, we knew we couldn't do this alone. So partnership was going to be a big thing. So Heath and I, the two of us and some other leadership at our institution, we traveled to the HQ of about 5 or 6 of these large tech companies that have been at the frontier of this. And you know, these are the Googles and the Microsofts and the OpenAIs and the Anthropics. And we met with all of them and decided, you know, ultimately we're going to pick one of these to be at our side, not in an exclusive manner, but someone who can truly be in bed with us and lend we wanted to be able to step into their shoes. So we got to the fall where we announced our partnership with Microsoft. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And that got us sort of, you know, where we wanted to get to right now, which is this activation period. So you might be wondering sort of what is CATS AI at its core, right? So if you think about it, I've called it this framework. This is the governance that we had set up. And this looks fairly simple if you just look at it as an org chart. It's not simple, but it is clear. And actually for us, we have posted this transparently on our now CATS AI website. We wanted people to know who's involved, how things might flow through this, and why it's so important that we have a broad table, but we've divided it up based on functional areas that matter to us. So this subcommittee structure is really the key, right? The 5 subcommittees across the bottom, we have one in education, administration, healthcare, research, and then student success. And we took an open nominations process. When our president announced CATS AI at the end of our sort of design period, we did an open campus nominations process. And we had over 300 submissions in super interested. In fact, I loved reading through all the statements of interest because we saw how many people loved what was happening, wanted to be a part of it. We're already using AI all over campus. And so we've now populated through a selection process those subcommittees. They're not building policy. I want to remind everyone, we're not, the whole goal here is not for that group to build policy, but to come up with proposals, opportunities. Where are we headed in your domain? Bring forward this sort of the mega trend opportunity in your field that we need to know about, invest in, partner for, cost share around. And those things then flow up through the operations group to a leadership council that can then be a decision-making body. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things here in between, which are more of the activation things and the engagement pieces. This is going to be something that we're going to send out some of these slides, and you can look more into it. And we have on our website also more information on that.
Yeah, and that's a great reminder. All of what we're showing here, plus a few things that we're just not going to get to, we're going to include in the slide deck and would love to make sure we share. I think what has been so interesting as we've gotten to this does look clean now. It has looked really messy at different times. It's so interesting that I would say 2/3 of what's on that screen existed already. It was maybe about re-articulating what the group or the focus was going to be, but much of it was there. And then some, to Ian, to your point, the subcommittees, right? That was about going through a process, and it's been very interesting to see the 300 applications of people that wanted to be involved. There were another couple hundred people that said, I don't really think I'm supposed to be on a subcommittee, but I am chomping at the bit to figure out how to be more engaged. So the level of interest and engagement has really been incredible. And I think it starts to then feed into that word adoption, a lot of where we feel like we are today or where we're going, and your favorite word to use when we talk about this that I'm not going to steal from you.
Well, and so one other key aspect is the CATS AI team. So
Sure.
It's a broadly matrixed org chart with it's broadly participatory, a lot of people involved, stakeholders across the campus. But also importantly, right at the very center where it says CATS AI Director is a team that is facilitating the activation of the whole governance structure. And that's going to be, we are already seeing that's a really key aspect of this, keeps a cadence of all the people who need to meet, makes sure that there are takeaways that come out of those meetings flow to a different place. And that team is going to be, I think, the real hub of all of this working well, and sort of the grease the wheel, if you will.
Now you want to get to your word.
Yeah.
Adam, you can say it.
Sandbox.
It's a plan.
So this is about central access. So when we think about okay, we have this governance structure and this framework activated. Lots of people are involved. People are excited about being involved. And it's doing well to sort of set up what we should be about, what's ahead of us, build the roadmap forward. And culturally, we have planted a flag and we've said we want to be an AI university. And that starts to permeate, right? People feel encouraged. People feel incentivized. We've handed everyone tools. 72,000 people have now received a centrally licensed co-pilot. We've got access to training now. But you have to think about sort of how are they touching these things, right? So our people now have received something that says push a button and you've got co-pilot. Fantastic. Lots of people are doing that. But the thing is, what we're trying to create, again, and go back to this builder mentality, we have this vision that started when we started to design this, that we don't just want to hand access to tools and training, but we want to create an environment where people feel like a builder, and they do this in what we're calling a sandbox. So this is, if you think about the entire campus as being a sandbox, we want to encourage activation, we want to encourage this builder mentality. And so in not just in the tools, but in an online environment, they can be building. But then through an activation of strategic initiatives, they can be engaged to incentivize to build things and share. So think about like a student that can build learning tools and then share it with their students through a marketplace. Or anyone in our staff that now can build a workflow tool, but then share it with others across the campus, right? So we want to have the ability to build, right? But then the ability to also participate in seeing others actually use the thing that you've built very quickly. The awesome thing about AI is it's quickly turning everyone into an overnight entrepreneur, which is fantastic. Anyone can be a builder, and then anyone can actually see that thing get deployed very, very easily, right? So this is key. This central access is key because this is an online environment, but it's really a sort of a culture that we're trying to build where we want everyone to feel like University of Kentucky is a sandbox for AI and not just a place where we're trying to get efficient.
Yeah, and it's really important to say this is something that as we've thematically gone through this journey over the last year, that we continue to talk about the fundamental underlining of what needs to exist for this to happen. And I think we'll share in just a second some of the level of how we've thought about those external partners and where we are today with that. But it feels like, right, the importance of if we are going to be talking about this, if we've got subcommittees starting to do work, all this effort is happening. Well, what are the first things we want to emulate for our campus to start to think about the path that they need to consider? Students, faculty, researchers, other staff, maybe administrators that have a curiosity, and so starting to really lean into what that path of education and understanding needs to be, right?
Yeah. So we call it our AI literacy and training hub. So if you think about it, this is the akin here, and the sort of the mirrored match is the AI Squared Center at Florida, and we benchmarked that pretty closely when we were talking about, okay, we need a central place that does the training, but they have to do it in very different ways. So online, asynchronous, in person, tangible? Can you feel it? Can you walk into a course? So we have a physical space in our student center that we have turned into an AI Learn Studio, where we'll be offering dedicated workshops, and you can walk in at any given time and say, how do I use this Copilot thing better? And people will help you do that right there. You can also online look at courses and look at a micro-certification. We have an AI degree we've just launched, but also this Tech 100 course, which has been built by some really smart people. It's interactive content. It was first open to just students for 1 credit. Now we've expanded it to all faculty and staff across the entire institution. All 72,000 can go in, sign up, and take this online course, which is AI Fundamentals in Ethics. Now, the key, though, Heath, is even if you offer everyone this access, right? They've got a tool, they've got resources, they've got access to training, it still doesn't ensure that they're all going to do it, right? People still, there will be some that are inclined, they want to do it, but some are not. And so we needed a set of strategic initiatives facilitated by that CATS AI team that could incentivize engagement, right? And people are incentivized in different ways to do stuff like this. So one of the things is CATS AI challenges. These are internal award programs. We're working on launching a number of these through all of those subcommittees. So each of those subcommittees is going to have their own challenge, where it's a call for proposals, where anyone with ideas, an agent you want to build, a process you want to implement, a program you want to launch, a collaborative team you want to put together to do something cool, will come and we will fund you and provide, actually funding is just a small part of it. The key is that we will provide engineering resources, some DevOps people, whatever it might take to get you to do that thing. That's one example of engagement. I'll pull it to another one on the bottom right, which is our CATS AI Alliance. I mentioned external stakeholders being very important to us. So we are putting together an alliance of external partners, industry and community, that will be by our side, not just for real-time feedback, that's a big part of it, but also to engage very directly around collaborative research, around sort of regional talent development programs that we can build, and just remaining responsive and also opening up experiential opportunities for our students. So that CATS AI Alliance is going to be another way that we will incentivize engagement of our partners with us, and then that gives reason for more of our folks, faculty, research, students, jobs, incentive to continue to engage with us.
Yeah, it's amazing. As we walk through this, I think every time we get chances to talk about this with small or big groups, which has been a lot over the last 10, 12 months, I see the faces of the people that have contributed or been a part of this, and it's a long, long list. It is just amazing the people that have come alongside and have been really passionate about the opportunities to think about that. So we wanted to leave with just a couple of thoughts. The blueprint, no pun intended, but the blueprint for us, right? And really what we've walked through and how Ian has helped to break it down, we really summarize it thinking about the mandate that we started with. We think about the governance and that framework and centralizing access, and then prioritizing literacy and engagement. So I want to share just a quick video that kind of walks through where we've been, and we'll use that to close.
You're hearing discussions about AI everywhere you turn. Sometimes the state of Kentucky gets left behind in these technological advancements.
We saw this as an opportunity to become one of the first AI universities for the state of Kentucky. The Commonwealth AI Transdisciplinary Strategy is a framework to holistically support our entire community to responsibly adopt AI for good.
More than 70,000 students and employees have access to Microsoft 365 Copilot. And it's not going to stop there. It's going to touch every corner of Kentucky.
We are giving the students of Kentucky the opportunity to build things that typically would only be built in Silicon Valley or on the East Coast.
Some medical school tutoring companies are charging $200 to $300 an hour to learn something complex like cardiology. That's just not realistic for pretty much all students. We just leverage all of these coding tools that are coming out, like GitHub Copilot, to make a new web platform that we built. The Socratic Tutor is an AI learning management system with natural language tutoring. Your teacher can upload documents and you can interact with those documents and make your learning more active. You have a tutor in your pocket that can help you understand the content conceptually. You can engage in dialogue with the tutor and take practice questions. It's transformed everyone's learning here at UK.
These are opportunities that I didn't have. And now we have a sandbox where people are building software and giving it to each other, learning new strategies and ways to use artificial intelligence.
I use AI every day. I just created a website which is helping my sorority, Alpha Chi Omega, get donations for our annual silent auction, which is part of our Real Strong Women's Weekend, where we host a domestic violence awareness gala. I've gotten double the amount of donations in half the time that we've gotten ever before. GitHub Copilot really helped me code and then launch this website from nothing. I can use AI to do so much more in my community and so much more for others. I love helping other people.
The impact that we can have with artificial intelligence is so profound. It's going to come from the students that we train here at the university and then going back to their homes to teach the people that they work with, that they live with about artificial intelligence. It's the students here who are going to integrate it into their every single day lives to change their future.